Welcome back to episode 9 of the In Our Headspace podcast. Right now, it is just me. Jared isn't able to make it this week. He's got school and other stuff going on. So today is my first ever solo episode of anything that I've done. I'm not well versed in recording by myself and having someone else to bounce off of. So it'll be an interesting first experience for everybody. But I think it'll be exciting. And I do have a topic I want to talk about. So it might be a little bit of a shorter episode. I know I said we were going to get back to the longer episodes last week, but then things changed. So we'll probably be on that next week. At our full-length episodes and stuff like that. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm just saying. Today I'm actually going to talk about change. Like the concept of change and dealing with change and all of that stuff. And why I think it's I think it's a super interesting topic to talk about. And I actually wrote a paper on it back in like my senior year or whatever of high school. But essentially where I'm going to start is I think everybody has trouble with change, for example, in their life. And if something is one way for so long and then all of a sudden that changes and they have to then readjust their whole either outlook on life or way of living life or location in which they live or anything like that, it puts, even if it's just subconscious, it puts stress on the body. But one of the lessons I feel like I've learned through growing up is that change needs to happen. Like it's in a sense it's necessary for I think people to grow and for your life to progress. And I'm not saying things need to change like all the time or anything like that, but I think it's important one of the most important lessons is to learn to accept change, because change happens without any control of your own. Like you can't decide, you can decide when some things change, but a lot of the devastating change that happens to people is devastating because they can't control it. They had no input on whether or not it was even going to happen. So I think I've gone through my life with a lot of changes as far as moving to different houses, different schools, friends, all that. So change is similar to fire, how it'll come through and it will destroy these seemingly good things and parts of your life without any mercy, without any resentment or anything. It'll just come through and things will change, and it'll feel like those parts of your life are just ruined in some cases. I'm not saying all change is bad or anything, but the opposite side of that is to look at it just like fire. Like fire can come through, it can destroy, but what it's doing is it's making way for better, more like a new thing to be in that spot. A new, like forest fires burn down forests, but then from that all that destruction, new trees grow and that whole shtick. But it's just interesting because when you relate that to your experiences in life, or the barriers and the walls that change in your life can break down, and kind of force you into this learning position, you can meet yourself with a lot of resistance to that evolution, or that where you're getting forced to change, and you either roll with it or you resist it like crazy. And if you resist it, I think that just makes it harder on yourself, and it keeps you from learning the things that you should try to learn. Because I'm a big believer in, even in really bad situations, you should always, the best you can do in a worst case scenario is try to get something out of it. As far as learning something or or understanding why it happened, or taking this aspect of why it happened and applying it in the future so it doesn't happen again. Like, there's always something that you can learn from almost every bad situation, same as good situation. But as far as dealing with bad situations, I think it's really important to understand, like, there's always going to be first of all, there's always going to be bad situations happening. Like, there's never going to be a period in life where, like, everything's just amazing and good. Like, there's always something going on. And that seems really pessimistic, but I mean that in a sense of, once you understand that, things seem less bad, I guess. Like, once you recognize, oh, it's normal for something like this to happen, it becomes less devastating, and you can actually, it gives you this sense of, like, control over your own life, which I think is extremely important to have. Because if you don't have control, and I've touched on this in previous episodes, but if you don't have control over what you're doing in life or what's happening to you, it can put you in this, like, state where you're just kind of floating and you're tumbling through life, and things are just happening to you and you're not actually taking initiative. And it can cause really bad anxiety. It can cause bad, like, insecurity issues and all that, because you don't feel like you're in control of anything, and everything's just at the whim of fate. And sometimes people live that way because they want to and they like to, which is fine. But I'm mostly talking about if you're going through something that's, like, a not positive thing, as far as, like, being out of your control. I think it's a comforting feeling to know, at least from my experiences, that, like, change is supposed to happen. It's over. In the end, it's a good thing. If you can get out of it and look back on it, that's, I think, an overall positive, because you've made it through. And once you've made it through one bad thing, you can get through the next bad thing. And then there's tiers of it. But, like, all that to say, I think it's just fascinating. And I didn't even funny thing about me saying this wasn't instigated by any current events, but it just hit me that it kind of is topical. Like, it makes sense. There's going to be a lot of change that happens in the near future for our country due to the election. Whoever wins or loses or whatever goes down, there's going to be change. And that's the whole point of this cycle, is for change. And not to be all, I'm not trying to be political or, oh, don't worry, guys. Like, that wasn't even the initial goal of this, but it just hit me that it kind of relates to dealing with this change is actually, it can be made easier if you just understand it. And I think that leads on to my next thing I was wanting to talk about, was once you understand something, you're obviously less scared of it, because you know how it works, you know what's coming, and it gives you that control. And I was having a conversation the other day about, and I don't remember what it was about, other than the fact that I took away from our innate human desire to understand everything. And I mean everything that we come in contact with in life. If we don't understand something, we're either scared of it or we don't like it. And we usually avoid it. Like, it's really weird to think about, but it's part of humans' journey throughout however long we've been here to observe everything around us, and just, like, it's basically like how science is. Like, we just try to figure out how every little thing operates and works, so we can either control it or use it for our own advantage, or work around it. Like, it's all of these things. But the irony of it is, we don't seem to try to understand, I guess, other people as much as we try to understand the things around us or our environment. And this is all just off the top of my head. Like, I'm kind of rambling, but it's fascinating to me that there's so much capacity to be closed-minded in terms of once someone believes one thing, they can't fathom someone else believing a different thing. And I know it's so weird that it keeps looping back on, maybe my brain subconsciously is thinking about all this stuff because of what's going on, but I'm totally not trying to make any statements here. I'm just saying, like, just as a fact of life, humans have been we've been trusting, but we've been also very untrusting. Even going back to just different, like when civilizations were first finding each other, and then they'd build into cities, but then there'd be battling cities or countries, and we've got all this like division, if you will, by nature, because for whatever reason, and I still haven't really processed it or thought about it enough to really come up with a theory for it or anything, but we can't seem to understand other people as well, or we don't have the desire to understand other people as much as we have a desire to understand what's going on around us. And we're always reaching towards the horizon and always looking past instead of understanding what we're in now, and the people around us, and how it's so hard for us to even understand ourselves and how we feel a lot of the time, as far as even just our own emotion. There's times where you're feeling a certain way and you're feeling down, or you're feeling really happy, or you're feeling really just nothing, and you don't know why. And it's incredibly frustrating to be in that situation where you're like, why am I so mad right now? There's nothing for me to be mad or stressed about, and I'm mad and stressed, or things like that. If we can't even understand ourselves, how do we hope to understand another person who we have no connection to? It's just fascinating to me how that even, it's just ironic, I think. But I think tying back into change, it's once you understand, take that desire to understand, and you kind of start pointing it at certain things in your life, it can really help with so many different aspects of, there's so many instances of almost autopiloting through certain parts of your life and just going and I said this before again, but know why you're doing stuff. Know the reason you're making certain decisions. Give yourself goals, mini goals. That way you're wait, why am I doing this again? Oh yeah, because of this. A personal example would be right now. I'm doing this thing I am very not practiced in as far as doing solo stuff. I feel like we've gotten the hang of doing the podcast together pretty well. Incredibly strange doing it for myself, but I'm able to get into these little rants where I can just speak from my mind. But I think the thing that's getting me over this big hill of difficulty or change is my goal is to be consistent with this podcast, is to I don't want to have nothing to put out this week, so I'm making it happen. However poorly this episode might come out, because it probably isn't going to be as interesting, me just rambling about things I think, compared to Jared and I bouncing off of each other. And I think that's a lot of the appeal to this. But I want to be, since I believe these things, since I am talking about these things and trying to convey those to other people, I should probably practice it. I think it's important that if I'm going to practice, it comes back to the concept of practicing what you preach. If I believe one thing, I probably shouldn't go and do the opposite. If I believe that you should set these goals, or you should commit to what you're doing and all that, I want to be doing it. And me knowing why I'm doing this podcast, I'm able to kind of pull something from within me I probably wouldn't do on my own. I probably wouldn't go and just record an episode of a podcast right now if I hadn't done these past 8 episodes. And I want to hold myself to it, and I want to be good on our word for having an episode out every week. And yeah, so I think it's just interesting, like these little constants, I guess, or these natural parts of life, and change and pushing through and like taking what you can from certain situations. Like, I think it's a really important thing that I feel like somehow it got missed from a large group of people from whatever time. Like, I'd say most people. I'm not even trying, and I realize I sound like I'm trying to like, I'm not trying to put anybody down or anything like that. I just think like I want to speak my mind about how I feel things. It's mostly coming from a place of helpfulness. Whether or not it's helpful, I understand, but I just think if we approach things, if we take an approach to life, understanding that nothing lasts forever and things will change, and that's a good thing, and embrace change rather than resist it, because no matter how much you resist change, that's not stopping it. No matter how much you resist wanting or having to move to a different house, you have to move to a different house if you don't want to move away from where you're at. Or like, oh, I have to go now, I have this commitment now and I have to stick to it. There's certain situations where, yeah, I guess you could call it a relapse on that commitment and just stop doing it. Like, I could just, you know what? Let's just take a 1-week break from the podcast. But to be honest, I don't want to have to like go and post everywhere. Like, by the way, no episode. Like, I would feel guilty, not for anybody's expectations, not for anybody's requirements, for anything other than myself. I'm holding myself to a certain standard. So I am now feeling accountability for something that no one else is holding me to. And I think that's a cool thing. That's a cool feeling, because it's like, again, it gives me that control. I have this like active like want to do this thing, and I'm not going to let myself not do it. A good example is, and I said the channel once before, but my YouTube channel, which I don't think anybody should look up, merely on the fact that like it's not something I'm super proud of yet. I really enjoy doing it, but I haven't posted on that YouTube channel since like February or something like that. And before that, I hadn't posted since like that previous November, like a year ago. So I think the thing that makes me less proud of that YouTube channel is I didn't commit to it. And I had my reasons. Like, I was super busy at the time. There was a lot of stress going on. So like, it wasn't good for me to commit to the YouTube channel at the time, but that's also because maybe I didn't start the YouTube channel at a good time in my life, or at the proper moment. So I might go back. I will be going back, and like we will be more active on that channel at some point. But my whole point to this is I learned the lesson once. I tried to commit to it. I was like, I'm going to do this. We did all this work for it. Got these like, I made a whole opening animation. I made an outro animation. We bought these games to play. We organized time and scheduled time out together, and then we recorded it. And then I went through and I fairly heavily edited each video and then put them out, because I was like, in order to even get the ball rolling, you got to push the ball, you know? And so the first couple videos on that channel are like not good in my opinion, but they're experience and they're there. And I was trying to get myself on a schedule to like push myself to to motivate myself. But I think where the conflict came there within myself was the fact that it was so much work. It was so exhausting on top of my current job as well. So it was like I would go to work and then feel good and then come home and be like, ugh, now I got to do more work. And then I'd do all that work until like 10 o'clock at night. And then I'd be like, ugh, well, I don't feel like I had an evening. And then the next day I'd do the same thing. So it was like, it really wore it down on me really fast. And that was just a learning experience as far as creating stuff goes, is you don't want to run yourself into the ground, because that'll make the whole product itself suffer. And that's why with this podcast, it's like, we only do one a week. It's pretty casual, fairly low editing. People don't know this. Well, some people do, but they're surprised when I tell them I edit this podcast. Like, I cut stuff out, or I'll change stuff and move stuff around, because like I want it to be as good of a thing I can make out of it. I want it to represent me and Jared well. So like, anyways, the whole point is like, even if you don't get it the first time, I still took a positive lesson out of my past. It's not a failure by any means, but my past experience. Like, the thing that I kind of left behind, like in the dust because I was burnt out, isn't like a negative thing in my head. It's like, oh, well, I want to do that. I've been wanting to do this podcast since before I did this YouTube thing. So I'm just going to go do the podcast thing because it's the exciting thing for me. And maybe that's just me chasing after the next fun thing in my brain. But now I feel like I'm at a point where I could do both. And which is, like I was saying, I might end up doing that because it's very fun for me to create things, and it's very fun for me to just put myself, I guess, out there for other people to observe. I've always liked the idea of creating content, but I don't want to also be that person that forces my beliefs and views and opinions on the internet, because it's like, I don't care that much. I don't know if you could tell. I'm an opinionate. I believe in the things I believe, but I'm not extremely opinionated. Like, I don't like to force what I think onto other people. I just like to talk about the things I like to talk about. And maybe that comes off as whatever, but anyways, that was a little side tangent about content creating, but I think I was mostly using that as an example to understand that, like, that I wasn't ready for that change. Even though it was self-imposed, I still tried to, I changed, like, I did like a double flip, I guess. Like, I was like, cool, I'm going to do this YouTube thing. And then I did it. And then that changed my schedule drastically. Like I was saying, like I was putting a lot more work on myself than I initially thought it would be. And then I was like, I can't handle this. And then I dropped it. But in some scenarios, you can't just drop it. Like you have to keep committing to it. Fortunately, that was more of an example of holding accountability for yourself. But I think, like, even in those situations, because I've definitely been in those situations where your life feels like it just flips, and you're like, what? And you just got to run with it, and that's fine. Like, the biggest thing that you need to know when going through that is, like, life keeps moving. Like, you're just gonna have to keep walking forward, because as long as you keep your feet moving, you're fine. You won't stagnate. And I feel like stagnation, in my opinion, I know I've stated this, but stagnation is bad. Stagnation is where you've basically given up, and you don't want to keep moving. Like, you're just like, screw this. And that's my definition, at least. You're just like in a state where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't keep going anymore. All of this, like, you kind of just slowing yourself down. And I know it's different being my age, being young, 21 now, woohoo. It's definitely different from my perspective as a young adult. I've still got that fire under my butt, but even for people in my surrounding life, I still see that. Like, even though they're settled down or whatever, you still see it. Like, you can tell when someone's got something that they're moving towards. So you can tell they're constantly pushing. And there's plenty of people in my life that are way older than me that are that way. And so I don't want to make it seem like, oh, well, I'm just young and naive and it's natural for me to feel this extreme motivation, because it can get it will definitely slow down as I get older. I understand that, but I don't know. I don't know where. It's kind of a dead end point, if I'm being honest, but it's mostly just raw thoughts. Like, I'm just speaking from the top of my head, and I think these few topics that I've talked about are like a little bit preachy, but it's how I think, it's how I believe. I kind of just want to share it, especially, this is a shorter episode. Like, we're nearing the end already. I apologize if that's sad news. But I just wanted to, like, I picked some topics that I felt strongly about, so I felt motivated to actually, like, ramble on about them, because if I don't do that, then anyways, I'm screwed. Anyways, that was episode 9. I know it's shorter, but that's all good. It's probably our shortest episode yet, but setting records here. Don't forget, we've got all social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I almost forgot Facebook. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, and we're on Apple Podcasts. So if you want to listen to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, that's up to you. Go ahead and follow us on social medias for you just get notified every time we set out a new episode. I put a little snippet up, the whole thing, and it also helps, like, spreads awareness about us and our show. But I think the biggest thing is, like, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, it'd be cool if you left some sort of rating. Don't have to leave a review or anything, but the rating helps, like, when people at a glance, But anyways, yeah, that was episode 9, talking about just quite literally just inside my head. So I guess that's, like, a very fitting for this for the show. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and hopefully we'll have Jared back on next week, and we'll do a full episode. So sweet. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.